Walk into almost any convenience store on Earth right now, hand over 15 cents, and walk out with a reliable tool for creating fire. That retail price, roughly 1 Chinese yuan, has been completely frozen for over 20 years. To understand how that price stays frozen, you have to look at the city of Shaodong in central China. Out of the 20 billion disposable lighters sold globally every year, 15 billion of them are manufactured inside this single county-level jurisdiction. That is 70% of the entire global supply. In a normal market, that 15-cent price tag should have disappeared a decade ago. Since the early 2000s, global inflation has surged. The cost of the plastic resins used to make these shells has tripled, and China's era of ultra-cheap manual labor officially ended. Shaodong has weaponized this 15-cent price tag into an impenetrable economic barrier, engineered specifically to bankrupt potential international competitors before they can even begin. Between 2014 and 2016, Shaodong's monopoly nearly collapsed. The region's factory owners realized that rising wages for their workers were rapidly consuming the tiny 1-cent profit margin they made on every unit. Up to that point, Shaodong relied entirely on human hands. If a factory wanted to output 1 million lighters a day, they had to maintain a standing army of roughly 1,000 workers, sitting at long tables, manually placing metal springs and gas valves. To survive, the city pivoted to total autonomy. At Hunan Electric, the region's largest producer, a welding floor that once required 200 workers was entirely replaced by automated assembly lines. Those same lines now require just 30 technicians, and daily production has quintupled to 5 million units. The math of this shift is brutal. By engineering the human factor out of the assembly line, the labor cost per lighter dropped from 1/10 of a yuan down to less than 2/100 of a yuan, or about 2/10 of a US penny. Shaodong took a product that used to be a labor-intensive handicraft and turned it into an output of high-tech robotics. They automated the assembly so completely that domestic inflation stopped mattering. In the West, the preferred method for cost-cutting is the vertical gigafactory, bringing as much of the supply chain in-house as possible. Shaodong went the exact opposite route. They rely on extreme specialization, splitting the assembly process across 114 independent micro-companies, erasing the physical distance between their specialized suppliers. Shaodong's factory owners removed logistics expenses entirely from the domestic supply chain. But surviving the domestic costs was only half the battle. Because they export 70% of their inventory overseas, these factories had to figure out how to ship high-density, low-value items across the ocean without the freight cost exceeding the value of the product. This data visualization shows how global carriers like UPS and FedEx calculate shipping costs using dimensional weight. Instead of just weighing a package, carriers charge based on the total volumetric space that package takes up inside the cargo hold. To beat this calculation, Shaodong engineers treat the physical geometry of the lighter as a variable they can manipulate. By upgrading the quality of the plastic polymers, they are able to shave 1/10 of a millimeter off the internal walls of the lighter, keeping the fuel capacity identical while shrinking the total outer footprint. That fraction of a millimeter translates directly to geometric profit. When you pack those slightly thinner lighters onto retail trays, you can cram tens of thousands of extra units into a single standard shipping container. Since the cost to ship a container across the Pacific is a fixed rate, packing more units into the exact same space drives the international shipping cost per lighter down to a microscopic fraction of a cent. If Shaodong controls 70% of the global market, and they have successfully engineered their costs down to absolute zero, the obvious question is why they don't raise the retail price to 20 cents. They hold a monopoly. They could easily harvest billions in profit. This chart illustrates the business strategy known as limit pricing. Shaodong intentionally caps their profit margins at a razor-thin 10%, forcing the global retail price to sit firmly at 15 cents. That price ceiling sits completely below the baseline production costs of anyone else in the world. If an entrepreneur in India, Mexico, or the United States wanted to take a piece of this market, they would first have to spend tens of millions of dollars on fifth-generation robotic filling machines. Then, they would have to build an entire city of specialized suppliers from scratch, all while absorbing massive financial losses trying to match that 15-cent price tag. So no one tries. The ubiquitous 1 yen lighter remains untouched on convenience store counters everywhere, a quiet artifact of absolute efficiency. Shaodong proves that global manufacturing dominance does not always require high-value technology like aerospace components or advanced semiconductors. Often, the most impenetrable monopolies belong to whoever can completely master the fractions of a penny.